No human eyes have seen this since 1912. The state of preservation is uncanny. It really is. I mean, now I feel like the archaeologists that found King Tut's tomb.
Two and a half miles down on the bottom of the Atlantic lies what's left of the world's most famous ship. Since it was discovered 20 years ago, the Titanic's hulk has been giving up its secrets. More is known about this ship and the 1,521 people who died on her maiden voyage than any other maritime disaster.
John Jacob Astor put Madeline Astor into the lifeboat right through one of those windows right there.
The Titanic is tales of heroes and cowards, of greed and generosity, of astounding bad luck and incredible good fortune. It's an epic story that became one of the most successful feature films of all time. But now the Titanic is fading. The sea is claiming her remains.
Titanic is going away. It's corroding as a result of Mother Nature. So we want to get in there and take a look at what is contained within Titanic before she's lost forever.
The man who made the movie, James Cameron, is bewitched by this ship.
Unbelievable.
Diving more than 30 times to explore her remains. Now Cameron, supported by the Discovery Channel, is going back to the Titanic for the final time.
I'm gonna kind of wrap up my 10-year odyssey with Titanic with this expedition. I won't be coming back here, so.
He's taking an amazing high-tech expedition to find more of Titanic's lost treasures.
Oh, say it's not the clock. Say it is not the clock on the mantle. Oh my God.
And trying to uncover her last mysteries. "350 miles out into the North Atlantic from Newfoundland lies the prize. 35 hours steaming aboard the Russian ship Keldysh. She is the world's biggest research vessel and the mothership for the Mirs, two ultra-deep diving submarines which will take Cameron 12,500 feet down to the wreck. It's a familiar routine for him.
See you in the sunshine.
Can you switch on path number 2? Yes, I can. I'll give you camera 1. Yep, there it is.
The approach to this expedition is entirely new. The aim is the ultimate high-tech investigation of Titanic. Cameron uses the three-man Mirs as his deep water exploration platforms.
Okay, we're in.
At the wreck, the Mirs launch a fleet of remotely operated camera vehicles, or bots. The bots are like roving eyes. Their only attachment is a fishing line-like optic fiber, which carries camera pics and control signals from the Mirs. For this trip, Cameron and Discovery have created new mini-bots, smaller than anything he has been able to use before. The aim is to penetrate deeper into the wreck than has ever been possible. Perhaps even as far as the legendary Turkish baths, a symbol of Titanic's extraordinary luxury and not seen for more than 90 years. Cameron also hopes to answer questions about a fire that raged in the Titanic's boiler room during most of the maiden voyage, which may have weakened the ship's watertight bulkheads and made it sink faster. Previously, he's only been able to explore with the people he can fit into the Mirs and minimal underwater communications, which through 2.5 miles of water is worse than bad cell phone coverage.
A is 15. Tell them we're not reading them very clearly.
Now, for the first time, he plans to explore inside Titanic with live sound and video links back to a mission control room on board the Keldysh. He wants visual communication with his backup team of experts via a 13,000-foot-long optic fiber link.
Neil, you copy. Mission control, you copy? Guys?
We've got you.
All right, I'm going to need you on live.
Absolutely. Looks incredible.
Outstanding, outstanding.
A team of experts has been assembled to literally try to look over Cameron's shoulder as he ventures deep into the heart of the wreck. This lineup includes Ken Marshall, who's made a 40-year study of Titanic structure and will help guide Jim through the maze.
C-55 and 57 and both portholes have a real high degree of clarity.
Don Lynch, a historian who knows the personal stories of the Titanic passengers.
Colonel Gracie is there, who was like everywhere throughout the whole sinking. He was heroic in that way. I mean, he one of those personalities a lot of people didn't like, but he was everywhere at once and making sure every woman he saw got into a lifeboat.
Park Stevenson is an engineer who helps visualize Titanic's interiors.
Well, the Marconi apparatus was the ship's means of talking to the outside world.
And archaeologist Mike Arbuthnot, who's compiling the definitive Titanic database.
Approaching the wreck, it was just this monument just emerging out of the blue, and it was so massive, and it was interesting. It almost looked like a stone monument.
Exploration of Titanic over 20 years has helped build up a very clear idea of what happened on the night of April 14, 1912, when the unsinkable ship sank in less than 3 hours.
Iceberg, right ahead!
Titanic was racing through the night, full steam ahead. Her owners, White Star Line, were trying to make headlines with an exceptionally fast crossing, even though they had been warned about icebergs.
Hard to starboard! Hard to starboard! Hard to starboard eye!
When the fatal berg was first seen, Titanic was heading straight for it at nearly 25 miles per hour. The lookout's warning averted a head-on, but the 46,000-ton ship struck the iceberg a glancing blow. It was not a huge hole that started the Titanic sinking, but a series of splits in the steel plating that let in enough water to overwhelm the ship. Titanic was built with a series of watertight chambers. She was designed to survive the flooding of the 2 forward compartments or any 4 others. But the iceberg opened the front 5, and Titanic was doomed. As she went down by the bow, the nearly 900-foot-long ship broke its back. The bigger front section went down first, dragging the stern of the ship completely vertical, before tearing itself free and going down like a torpedo, ripping off most of the superstructure. It's estimated that during the free fall, the front of the ship picked up a speed of more than 20 knots, about the same speed as when Titanic hit the iceberg. The bow plowed into the ocean floor, embedding itself 62 feet. And it's here Cameron and his team will focus their exploration. He's got the experts, the technology, and one of the most experienced deep submersible crews in the world. Bits of the system have been tested separately, but it's never been assembled until now. No one knows whether it'll work. The first thing they must do is get down to the wreck and test the communications. It's a 2.5-hour descent Jim's done many times before, but never with a 15,000-foot tether of fiber optic cable. The cable from the sub joins one of the ship's inflatable boats, or ribs. The rib keeps lined up with the Keldysh and allows sound and picture from the sub to be transmitted back to mission control. To get pictures back from inside the Titanic, there are 3 separate links which all have to function at the same time. It will be a fantastic technical achievement, if it works. The piece that's never been fully tested is the fiber optic link from sub to surface. Making this work is an incredibly delicate operation, and it's risky. The fragile optic fiber is wrapped in a casing with a 500-pound breaking strain. It's a double-edged sword. The cable is weak enough to snap easily if the 18-ton sub jerks when it's taut. It's strong enough to completely foul up the sub's propulsion system, and it's long enough to get impossibly tangled if it's let out too quickly. After an hour's descent, 6,000 feet below the surface, the worst happens.
I believe we're fouled, guys. The cable looks like it's going up, but it could be looping over us like this. Hard to say. We should be paying out by now, but we're not. This is not a good condition, Tolia. I think we made a mistake. I think it's bad.
They're no longer worried about getting pictures back, but dealing with a potentially dangerous situation for the Mir team.
A loop came around the tail fin of the Mir, has caught. Now the cable won't necessarily break, and this is the dangerous part of this. It has a steel strength member. What happens if it bends though, it'll attenuate the signal, so you lose communications, you lose video signal, but you're still hooked.
Mission control, anybody? Mission control.
We've got to monitor this closely as they're starting their ascent back to the surface. We're madly taking cable to try and keep the whole thing from fouling the sub and potentially doing something even worse.
The only thing the sub can do is dump ballast and head for the surface. The challenge of trying to get real-time pictures from the wreck of the Titanic has just become abundantly clear to James Cameron.
Well, we sort of made TV history up to a point, right up to the point that it went, and we got a loop over us somehow. I saw it on the tail camera, I saw it coming down, and we tried to get out of the way, and I literally watched it come down, come right past the wing, and hook under the wing. Oh, we're screwed.
The team is also having problems with the ship's satellite communications.
Sensor boom light.
A parts failure has meant that all satellite systems are down. There are no spares on board, and the nearest land is 350 miles away, beyond helicopter range. Fortunately, no one is in danger, and there is a solution. If this can happen in 2005, it's a stark reminder of the desperate situation Titanic was in nearly a century ago, when communication was with a Morse code transmitter.
The card is dry, so that's good. It's a good sign so far.
Communications problems don't stop diving operations. During this two-leg, 3-week expedition, Cameron must make use of every precious minute underwater with the mirrors. Just because the surface can't see him doesn't mean he can't find anything new. The job of finding the wreck 2.5 miles down is that of pilot and Mir inventor Dr. Anatoly Sagalevich. Fortunately, he's been down many times before.
80 meters. Too high.
80 meters, nice.
80 meters.
You told me 80 meters, and it was 80 meters. Yeah, baby. The bottom of the sea, baby, bottom of the sea. And we're coming down fast, as promised. You're about to see a huge silt out, folks. Just follow the skid marks. They'll take you to Titanic. All skid marks lead to Titanic. There's Titanic. You see it? It's a picture of the bow. It's Titanic, dude. Check it out, huh?
Okay, get ready. Here you go.
You see it? There's Titanic right there, guys. Pretty cool, huh? Sweet. Okay, roger that. We're going to come up into position at the bow. We are going to split the bow crane with you. We will go on the right side of the bow crane. You go on the left. But don't forget, after that, we're going to make a diagonal over to the wreck's starboard deck house. So that's a slight diagonal across the forecastle toward you. So give us a little room to do that. This is hatch 1, and this is the hatch. We just saw it on the debris field. The exact hatch. Look, you can really see down the hatch. Very nice. So this is the base of the mast here. Now, when we were here in 2001, the mast was still almost perfectly intact. Probably hadn't changed shape since the ship sank, you know. So you can see it's collapsed down. It's just touching the hatch combing on the port side on hatch 3. This is hatch 3 or the bunker hatch. And this is the crow's nest door. And that's right where Frederick Fleet would have come out to come on watch that night. Right there. That's...
May well have been the last person to pass through that doorway.
Oh, I'm sure he was. Boat deck level right now, it went down A deck, B deck, C deck, D deck, and down to E deck. This is our kind of main elevator that we use to get up and down through the ship. It really allows us to get to all the different deck levels on Titanic. So in a way, it's a blessing.
This is where the grand staircase once stood, the centerpiece of the passenger decks, and perhaps Titanic's most opulent feature. Down this staircase, the Titanic's wealthiest passengers, members of high society from Europe, America, and Canada, made their grand entrances to the dining room. This was the place to be seen.
Titanic's grand staircase was really, by far, in my opinion, the most dramatic, exquisite interior feature. It extended from the boat deck all the way down to F deck. The really elegant part of the staircase went from the boat deck to E deck. That's 6 decks. And it was made out of pale English oak and beautiful gilded wrought iron and bronze balustrades all the way down. It must have been really spectacular to stand at the boat deck and look all the way down to the E deck level there, down all those 6 decks. Of course, it certainly doesn't look like that today. It's all gone.
The fate of the grand staircase has always been a mystery. Initially, it was thought that it collapsed into the heart of the ship, but there's no sign of it. There's still plenty of wood preserved in the wreck, so it's surprising that a structure this solid is no longer there.
You see, I think that the whole stairwell just lifted right out, the wooden stairs, leaving only the foundation. And these girders are just collapsed parts of the dome and so on from overhead that fell in when the ship hit the bottom. But you'd have so much lift off that much wood and nothing holding it down because it was designed to be held in place, you know, more by gravity than anything. And we just stumbled upon that by accident when we were making the movie. And we sank our set and the staircase broke loose and floated up. It actually created a pretty dangerous condition because we were all in the set and suddenly this thing came roaring up underneath us. It was pretty wild.
Jack Thayer thought that he saw the bow of the ship come up out of the water, which we wonder now if that was maybe the staircase. And one of the survivors was found floating on a piece of staircase and was picked up by a lifeboat. At least there is some record of what we...
One of Titanic's most enduring legends is that the ship's band, actually a small string orchestra, played as she went down. It's a true story, which some people have dismissed as an astonishing exercise in futility. But that doesn't do justice to the bravery of those 8 musicians. As passengers started to pour out onto the decks, the orchestra leader, Wallace Hartley, decided that music might help them stay calm. With lifeboats full of women and children being launched around them, the orchestra played upbeat tunes to the panicking passengers. But as the situation got more and more desperate, some of the survivors say the musicians changed their tune from upbeat to fatalistic. Many recalled the strains of the hymn, "Nearer My God to Thee," sounding across the flat, calm sea.
Every one of them was lost in the end, and they did find Wallace Hartley's body later, and when they returned it to his home in England, more people attended his funeral than actually lived in the town. The public was so caught up with that story.
True or not, the musicians continued to play right until the Titanic went under and died as heroes. There were many heroes that night, and some of their stories are still here to be uncovered. We're on our way to find evidence of 2 young men who helped save hundreds of lives. At the bottom of the Atlantic, film director James Cameron is beginning his last and most ambitious exploration of the wreck of the Titanic.
Right in front of us is about the only thing that's still really recognizable on the bridge, and that's called the telemotor. I'll get in a little closer on that here. But there's something to me very eerie and I don't know, kind of moving about this one lone monument. The rest of the whole superstructure is just stripped away here, and the only thing remaining is this one monument. Here, I'll put a little light on it so you can see the natural color. And it's made out of bronze. The ship's wheel would have mounted right in that kind of little hole right there. And you know, Gilligan is now pretty much standing right where Quartermaster Hitchens was when he was standing at the ship's wheel, keeping a straight and steady course for New York. And then First Officer Murdoch, who was the officer of the watch at that moment, I don't think he waited for the telephone to ring when the Crow's Nest guys called the bridge. I think he already knew what was going on. I think he was already in motion. He would have come running in a door that was right over here, right where that big tangle of wires is. He would have run in and yelled, probably at the top of his lungs, at least I would have, "Hard to starboard." Hitchens says, "Hard to starboard aye," and he starts cranking that big old ship's wheel over. And boy, it was many turns. It was a lot of hard work to get for him to get that rudder hard over. And you know, seconds counted so much. And you know, Murdoch looked out front and saw an iceberg right square in their path, and he had to decide: do I go left or do I go right? You know, and it's not clear whether any decision would have been the right one at that point. When we were making the movie, I had a choice to make. I could do it historically correctly, or I could do what people would think was correct. In fact, it was historically correct for a hardest starboard order to the helmsman to turn the ship to port, to the left. That was just the way it was in those days. They were called tiller commands, and by starboarding the tiller, you ported the rudder and you turned to port. So the hardest starboard command actually turned the ship to port. So a lot of people thought they were pretty nautical and sent me a lot of letters. You can stop sending the letters. I'm trying to set the record straight right now. We did it right.
The movie also played up the crucial role of Titanic's two heroic young radio operators, and Cameron has long wanted to fully explore their room.
We are just outside the door, which is going to take us to the Marconi room. And we're about to enter that right now and have a look around and try to answer some questions that have been bothering us since the last expedition here.
The Marconi room was the communications center for the ship. It was manned by two young radio operators, Harold Bride and Jack Phillips. They stayed in the room sending distress messages until the rising water drove them to close down the high voltage equipment and try to save themselves.
I think we're in. All right, these are the dynamo. This is the dynamo, which has a motor. It's a motor generator combination. And right ahead of us is the control panel that Parks wants us to image.
The night before the disaster, the Marconi transmitter broke and no messages could be sent out. With a ship full of rich and powerful people, all wanting to send news home from the maiden voyage, the two young men did what they were absolutely not supposed to do. They fixed the gear themselves.
Marconi maintenance manual says you're supposed to go on battery power, which gives you a range of about 80 miles or so, as opposed to the normal 250 plus miles. And the operators were supposed to leave it for a Marconi engineer to fix once they got back ashore. But Phillips and Bride went in there that night, spent 6 hours in the silent room troubleshooting the fault. They found a short in the secondary winding of the transformer. They fixed it, put it back together, tested it, and the transmitter was as good as new.
They worked all night and also modified the signals to get more signals out of the machine. Bride and Phillips' willful action was an extraordinary stroke of luck. Less than 24 hours after working all through the night, they were able to use their mended and modified transmitter to send a distress signal to the RMS Carpathia 58 miles away, which rushed to pick up survivors.
There's the knife switches. This is right where Jonathan Phillips switched off the set. Look at that. There's the knife switch in the down position.
Yeah.
And look at these regulators. This is, you can see the left one is cranked all the way over. They were really trying to get the spark up as much as they could as the ship was dying. You can see it right here. This is incredible.
Part of Titanic's technological hallmarks is this.
That's right. And part of what made the story so powerful was the rescue. The people who were saved, the 703 who were saved because of this machine. This machine that we're looking at right here. You know, we're in a wireless age right now. Everybody's, you know, it's wireless everything. But this was an example of, you know, at the turn of the last century, it was a wireless age as well. And people were enamored of this technology. There's the whole panel right there. There's the knife switch. The handle's knocked off it. Now, the question is, did he leave it in that position or did it get knocked into that position? If they worked right up till the end and seawater was pouring in the door, would you stand there and grab the handle on a 440 volt breaker? I don't know too many people that would. He wasn't stupid. These were smart guys. These were the computer geeks of 1912. So either he was incredibly brave or they left earlier than Bride said they did later.
There's no way of knowing, but one thing is certain. Hundreds of people owed them their lives.
What became of the two men in that room?
Well, they stayed building until very nearly the end, until they could hear the water coming up the deck, I think is what Harold Bride said. And both of them left, and they both jumped overboard. Jack Phillips was never seen again, but Harold Bride did survive.
And was he seen as a hero when he got back to home?
Well, they both were, absolutely, because they did stay at their posts until the very end and continued to transmit. They were responsible for the rescue of everyone.
Just like the Marconi operators, Cameron's team is struggling to restore communication systems from the Titanic. But can they do it in time? On board this giant Russian research vessel, movie director and explorer James Cameron is briefing his backup team about the next dive to the wreck of the Titanic.
E-23 is the target cabin for Molly Brown.
His hopes that they could see and hear him live from the wreck and help him navigate around it have been dogged by the problems of diving with a couple of miles of optic fiber cable trailing behind his sub. But this is the last mission Cameron intends to make here, and he seizes every opportunity to explore.
They're heading down, baby, down into the deep blue.
But once again, halfway down to Titanic, there are problems with the fiber optic link, and the video signal is lost.
If we can't get comms in a reasonable amount of time, then we'll have to cut away.
He's on the verge of cutting loose a mile of cable when the signal returns in the nick of time.
Yep, we got you back.
We are fine. That was RF loss. That was not you.
Man, I was 1 second from...
And when he finally makes it to the bottom, the link is still working. He's done it. He's live to surface.
There it is. It's a beautiful thing. Yeah, baby. That's what I'm talking about. We are live from Titanic, officially.
Congratulations.
They said it couldn't be done. I said it couldn't be done.
Cameron can now deploy his camera bots to try to get into the cabins and suites of Titanic's passengers and shed light on their amazing personal stories. Because this ship was so famous, we have a very clear idea of who was on board and in which cabins they stayed. And now Jim can explore with his support team looking over his shoulder. He is desperately hoping to find one of the most opulent cabins on the ship that was occupied by Isidore Strauss, the founder of Macy's, and his wife, Ida.
Well, the Strauss room is there. And I think it doesn't exist anymore. But you never know. You've got some preservation outboard and ouch. Oof. That's a classic. Just knock it down if it's in your way. That might lead to the Strauss room, but I don't think it's going to be worth it. That looks pretty messed up in there. Right on the other side of this web frame, right here, is the most opulent, beautiful room on the ship. And it's the room that we used as an architectural model for the Jack and Rose room, I mean for Rose's suite in the movie. Yeah. Let me see if I can just bump a rusticle here. This is always a little sketchy. Generally speaking, I don't want to do that. Because it causes a big silt out. That might not be a rusticle. That was pretty solid. It pushed back. Boom. There we go. All right, it's gone. And I'm still positive, so. No, maybe not.
That's an access.
All right, let's see what we got up here. Oh, that's the room right there.
And Strauss's, of course, were the loving couple that went down together.
I think there's a fish in there. Well, we don't know what happened to them. They definitely died in the sinking. And she stayed with him when she had a chance to get on a lifeboat. Well, I believe we are in the Strauss cabin. We are in the Strauss cabin, yes. They said it couldn't be done. Oh, say it's not the clock. Say it is not the clock on the mantle. Oh my God.
James Cameron has made a sensational discovery in his final exploration of the Titanic, the ship whose story he turned into the most successful movie in history.
Oh, say it's not the clock. Say it is not the clock on the mantle. Oh my God.
Look at the
This is outrageous. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, look.
The fireplace? Or
Yes, that's the fireplace.
no kidding, and there's a clock sitting right there.
Yeah. Look. Nice. Okay, I'm not going to get excited because I have to do some flying here. Oh, this is the clock we did in the movie because we based it on this photograph of the Strauss cabin.
Kidding.
It's the clock.
No kidding. Fantastic.
That's outrageous.
And it's remarkably well preserved. Look at that.
It's sitting on the mantelpiece.
Gilded. Sitting on place.
Look, there's a little gold andirons down at the bottom. And there's the ornate woodwork, which must have been teak, I guess, or some very high grade of wood. Oh my God. Oh, look. Oh, look. The gilt.
That's right.
The gilt inlays. Oh my God, it's the room. This is the room. We built this room. This is where, you know, Jack draws Rose next to the fireplace.
No kidding.
This is the room. There's where the mirror would go. Oh, this is outrageous.
Ken, what is that thing there?
That is a gilded sconce. There was
The last
one
time
on
we had this
either
much fun.
side of the fireplace up above it, and that one's fallen down.
Don, for those who don't know, who were the Strausses?
Well, Isabella Strauss was the founder of Macy's department store, and they're famous in the sinking because she wouldn't leave him, and they ended up going down together. They've been married 40 years, and she said, "Where you go, I go."
As I never thought this would be here.
Sitting in place.
All right, I'm going to try not to silt out here too much. I'm just going to come see what we got overhead here. Not too bad. Okay, I'm going to just ease forward now.
I see the fireplace here. So we were actually in their sitting room.
Mm-hmm. We're in the sitting room of a big parlor suite. Look how it's collapsed down there. Just to the right, nothing. Okay, I'm going to pull a little more tether in. This is the trick here. You pull in enough tether to work the space, and then you don't get vectored around by it. Well, it's pretty crushed down.
do a mosaic of this for sure.
We'll do our best, Daddy-O. Let's get some basic light going here. Try to see some of this woodwork here. That's a window. That's just a porthole. I think maybe a little more tether.
Guys, I have a question. You know, Jim's been in this area before, but he's never seen this stuff. Why?
Well, he actually hasn't been this far aft on the starboard side. Got very close in 2001. But as you saw a few moments ago, it looked so risky and dangerous looking aft with all the hanging wires and so forth. He didn't attempt it, and he was a little more daring this time, and you can see the payoff.
Huge.
Yeah. Be very careful about our fiber.
Copy that. Please be very careful about our fiber.
And you can see all the white paint here, so that we're definitely into C57 now.
You can see the wall in the background, which apparently is the restroom.
Little bit of the thing underneath the porthole.
See this? This is the.
This looks spectacular.
This is the sitting room. That's the bedroom.
Yes. There's the wall sconce next to the
Look, there's a wall
fireplace.
sconce.
Yeah.
Gold clock still sitting on the mantelpiece.
You can hear Mike.
Some more of that gilt woodwork
Yeah,
down there.
it's incredible.
Big rosette
yeah.
down there.
What is that?
More
Big,
gilt.
Gilded rosette.
Now this is the edge of the fireplace here had little gilt inlays.
See the ornate woodwork.
Look at down here. You have. See, they had little brass, gold-plated bronze inlays. Tolia, this is the room that we used for the movie Titanic. This is the room. You know where Jack draws Rose on the couch by the fireplace. That's this room. Oh, there it is. There it is. Well, the art department will be pleased. They did it exactly right. They nailed it. Look at that. Look at the crab crawling on the. Yeah, I've got a. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Absolutely. It's paying off big now.
Getting in here is a huge success for the new, smaller camera vehicles that Cameron has built with Discovery. He could never have got here with his original bots, Jake and Elwood.
As much as I love Elwood, he couldn't do this. He couldn't breathe into a room like this. It's just too much mass.
As the bots go deeper, we uncover more stories of the heroes and the villains of the disaster. As the Titanic sank, people's true characters were revealed. Some emerged as heroes and others as pariahs. This is the way into the suite of Bruce Ismay. As president of the White Star Line, Ismay occupied one of the 4 finest cabins on the ship. But in the end, he was one of the people to emerge from the disaster in disgrace. Ismay had personally requested the ship's captain, Edward Smith, to push Titanic to her limit, in the hope of arriving early and making a huge media splash. He also knew about the iceberg danger. He had personally received a warning telegraph, which he put in his pocket and forgot. Notoriously, Ismay climbed into a lifeboat, despite the convention that it was women and children first. He claimed later there was no one else around when he got in, but that was contradicted, and the press dubbed him Brute Ismay.
I don't know if he's a villain. I mean, I think evil is, there's a certain banality to evil, and all he really was just, you know, kind of a normal greedy businessman. His ship would be the biggest, most remarkable ship, that it would make headlines for coming in a little bit early. They were trying to impress people, and I think they tried a little too hard. You know, pride goeth before a fall, and hubris is one of the most important lessons of Titanic. Of course, here we are trying to do this complex operation down here at Titanic. You know, we run the risk of the same sort of thing. But I think that it's important on these expeditions to always be humble before the power of nature. You know, right now we're fighting a current. We're working with difficulty here at the bottom of the sea. You have to respect the ocean, and they didn't. And that's why Titanic's down here. This is Bruce Ismay's suite. This is the guy that left the ship. 1,500 people still on board. We're in the suite looking at the fireplace.
That's good. Hold right there.
There's some kind of a thing sitting on top of the mantle here.
Getting into Ismay's suite was really interesting. On one of the shelves was a little box, and you just know that his tie clip and his shirt studs and his cufflinks are all inside that box, still sitting there.
That's all the wiring in the walls, but the walls are gone. What we're trying to do is figure out what style the room was. By identifying this sconce, we might be able to identify the style of the room.
One of the places that Cameron has been hoping to find all along with the bots is the cabin of Molly Brown, known as the unsinkable Molly Brown. Molly was a 45-year-old firecracker, the wife of a wealthy Colorado gold miner. She was traveling abroad and only booked a last-minute ticket after her grandson was taken ill. It was a stroke of luck for many other passengers that Molly was on board. She turned out to be one of the heroes of the night, helping other people to safety and assisting survivors.
So Molly Brown was bodily lifted up and thrown in, and she had no intention of going.
Right. Now, was she just being macho?
She just said she was curious to see what was going on. You know, she wanted to go see what was happening everywhere else, and some man grabbed her and said, "You're going too," and threw her in the boat.
Molly couldn't really remember what room she was in, and all Jim knew to look for was a brass bed, which she said she slept in.
That's not a brass bed, that's a wooden bed. Not much left of it either. I don't know, Molly Brown said she was in a brass bed, but I don't see a brass bed. I think she visited somebody in a room with a brass bed.
Even today, touring the wreckage, it is still possible to get a feel for the opulence of Titanic's cabins and public spaces. And the twisted steel also reveals the amazing stories of people who survived the sinking.
This is really interesting what's right in front of us. Here's another electric boat winch, just like the one on the other side. It's got a railing collapsed down over it. There was a guy on board, Colonel Archibald Gracie, and he tells a really amazing story of survival. He's one of these, there are 3 or 4 people who are our kind of black box recorders for what it was like in the last minutes of Titanic to be standing on her deck as the water kind of came up and just washed them away. And his story is pretty dramatic. He was on this deck and people came screaming and running aft, and as the ship started to plunge, the water came racing back across the deck, and he said it picked him up like a wave at the beach, and he reached up and he grabbed up the top of the deck house, right where we're looking right here, and this railing down below us was up on top of the deck house. It's fallen down, but he grabbed this railing and he held on to it, and he forgot to let go, and it actually, he was so freaked out by the moment that it pulled him underwater, and it actually dragged him down. And then he said he felt this huge suction drawing him down, and he was underwater for an endless time. And probably what that was is all the water pouring down like a waterfall inside this grand staircase, and like a toilet bowl of the gods. And somehow he made it to the surface, and he managed to make it to collapsible B. That's an overturned lifeboat, and he survived. And this is right where that happened. Yeah, and of course so many people didn't survive, but he's one of the few that did. And it seems like everybody that did survive who was actually aboard, who wasn't out safe in a lifeboat someplace, had an incredible story to tell.
More incredible stories and another amazing discovery coming up as James Cameron reveals the last mysteries of the Titanic. In his final quest to uncover the last secrets of Titanic, director and explorer James Cameron has managed to navigate a remote camera deep inside the luxury suite of the infamous British couple Lady Lucille and Sir Cosmo Duff Gordon. Despite the Sea Rescue Convention, Women and Children First, both Lady Lucille and her husband managed to get into one of the first lifeboats off Titanic.
Lifeboat 1 had a capacity of 40 people, and in the end, it left the ship with only 12 on board, only 5 of whom were passengers, and only 2 of those passengers were women, and primarily Sir Cosmo and Lady Duff Gordon and her secretary, Miss Francatelli. And of course, there was the big debate about whether to go back, and I think the crewmen on board deferred to the peerage in the lifeboat, and whereas they, of course, felt that the crew were in charge. And so even though there was some debate about whether they should go back or not, nothing was ever done, and in the end, it looked like the Duff Gordons had sort of commandeered this lifeboat, and Sir Cosmo even paid each of the crewmen £5 just as a charity to get their lives together again afterwards, and it looked as if he'd bribed them. So of course afterwards, Sir Cosmo and Lady Duff Gordon, I think, were treated very harshly by the press and really by society in the long run. I think they suffered for this the rest of their lives.
Wealthy aristocrats, the Duff Gordons had paid for one of Titanic's expensive first-class cabins.
A little less than £40.
Which would be?
It was about $200 in 1912, which, depending upon how you play with the numbers, you know, you could say is as much as like $10,000 today.
Incredible.
It's like that's a mirror that's fallen out of a washstand. There's the remains of the washstand. This is the remains of one of the Pullman berths that's fallen. Let's see if a Pullman berth is indicated. Yeah, something over there. We're going to go see that in a second. But first I want to go see Lady Lucille's sink. There's one of those. No, it's a rack that you put your stuff in, your personal effects. We've seen those before. It's pretty open above. Oh look! Oh yeah! Oh yes! Now we see what the engraved windows look like. Nice. You never know when Titanic's going to surprise you. Give you a little cookie. I better get this right, because you know Parks will have to do a whole CG reconstruction of it.
I can see it lying. You see the head of the dog here? Here's the eye, ears.
It is Celtic. Look at that.
And here's the nose. It wraps around. Here's the tail, the hind legs, the front legs. It's like a wolf with.
I think I'm carrying a visitor, and this is Lucille's room. This is definitely Lucille's room.
Yeah.
I'm using a lot of up and not getting very far, so I suspect I'm.
That is beautiful.
Yeah, the only problem is we're recording this camera.
So this is
I got a pretty good shot of it there.
Cosmo's room.
Yeah.
He was titled from England, had been on the fencing team for the 1908 Olympics, and had married Lucille, who was a dress designer, and really very, very fashionable dress designer, very expensive clothing, and really sought out by a lot of the wealthiest ladies in the world.
Now this window, it's not only beautiful, but this design served a purpose. Is that right, Ken?
Well, not the design so much as the fact that it was basically a frosted piece of glass. That purpose was to allow privacy for the first-class passengers inside, because on this particular deck, on A deck, there was a promenade outside. Anybody could just walk by and look right in, see what you're doing, especially after dark. So you could raise this from below, and it would allow light in during daylight, but allow that privacy.
Spectacular. Now, what would a room like this go for?
Oh, I have to look it up. Wait, I could probably tell you. No, I don't have that. I don't have what they, I think, about 40 pounds.
It's amazing how when a ship sinks, things equalize. Water flows in different places, and it's almost like an earthquake. A grand piano will be upside down in the other side of the room, while the tiniest little bric-a-brac will still be sitting on top of a mantelpiece during a bad earthquake. Same thing happens when a ship sinks. You'll find some of the most delicate things amazingly preserved, and then other things that you would expect to be so solid and so durable, completely blown away.
Yeah,
and this is a perfect example.
If this section evenly floods, then by the time it hits the bottom, the water all around this particular item can act as like a shock absorber. And it'll have like a hydraulic dampening effect, which will protect individual pieces like this.
Interesting. Would you know whether or not that this glass is it thick?
Yes, it's relatively thick. It's at least a quarter of an inch thick and maybe thicker. And this is before the days of tempered glass too, which makes it doubly amazing.
93 years later, and look.
Yeah.
This is truly a surprise. Truly a surprise. You can see some of the chain mechanism up above there that helped to raise and lower it. This is a little hook here on the right that you could open up into 3 different positions and hang.
There's those dots.
Clothing on it. Yeah.
There's two on each side.
Look at the ship.
Yeah, you can see the ship.
That's just great. The old and the new. Titanic represented the latest and greatest of her period, you know, at the time. And this was considered antiquity and how far shipbuilding had come.
But if Titanic was so advanced, why weren't more people saved by the lifeboats? Coming up next.
We are on the starboard boat deck, and we're looking aft. And this object right in front of us here is the davit for boat 1. Of course, it's covered with rusticles, and you can see the bronze lead screw there, and this little square thing on the right side that is where they would have put the crank handle in to crank the davit. And the thing that we found, these davits were made by the Welland Davit Company. And the thing that we found when we did the movie, because we had exact reproductions of them made by the Welland Davit Company from their old plans, is that it takes a lot of muscle power to crank these things out. And of course the boats were all launched by hand, the davits were operated by hand. And it took a long time. So this is an interesting davit, probably the most historically interesting site on the boat deck of the ship, because here is where First Officer William McMaster Murdoch, struggled so hard to launch not 1, but 3 lifeboats off this same davit. He launched boat 1 about in the middle of the whole sinking crisis, and the boat went off with I think 12 people. And Don, how many could have fit in that lifeboat?
Well, Jim, you could have gotten 40 people into that lifeboat, and of the 12, only 5 of them were passengers and only 2 of them were women.
Yeah, I know, it's really interesting. You know, I've always puzzled about that because, you know, Murdoch was a pretty amazing guy, and he was the first one to get boats launched off the ship. He had 2 or 3 of them in the water before the officers on the other side of the ship had any.
And Jim, Jim, let me ask Don a question here. Whatever became of the lifeboats? Are they in a museum somewhere?
Well, no, the lifeboats were just, they were sort of inventoried after they were taken to New York. 13 of them were taken to New York, and they were sent back to England and then used on the Olympic because there was such a shortage of lifeboats after the sinking of the Titanic disaster.
Now, these lifeboats, guys, they were heavy, weren't they? I mean, they were really heavy, weren't they?
Yes, indeed they were. They were made of elm. It's quite a dense wood, and probably about 2 tons apiece, something along that line.
Jim, a lot of human drama played out right there, didn't it?
Well, yeah, you hit on an interesting thing, because they get the first 2 boats in the water, right? And Murdoch comes over and he looks down this stairwell and he sees green water pouring up those steps. The ship has minutes to live before the water comes rushing over the deck. And over here, you can see the deck house is kind of collapsed, but up there on the roof was another lifeboat that far away, and up on a roof with no lifting tackle, no way to get it down, no ramp, no thought given to how they were going to do that. Murdoch got a bunch of guys, went up on the roof, and I think just the adrenaline kicked in, and they just lifted it, shoved it to the edge, and they slid it down on some oars. And it's just an amazing scene, I think. Right down here on the deck, these people struggling so hard for their lives. And what he did was he cranked this davit back in, because you have to crank them out to lower the boat, and then you have to crank them back in to pick up the next one. So he cranked it back in a 3rd time, and that's just as far as they got before the water washed over them. and you can see that this davit is still in an upright position as opposed to cranked out. In my mind, it's a monument to Murdoch, to his crew, to the entire crew of Titanic that stayed at their post, that sacrificed their lives. It's in the movie. I made the point about the third class people sort of not faring as well as first class. If you were a third class male passenger, you stood about a 1 in 10 chance of surviving, and if you were a first class female passenger, it was 90%. So it was a big spread. And apparently, by all accounts, there was a near riot. Several hundred people who had realized that the last couple boats on the ship were all the way forward, and they came down and crowded around. The crew had to link arms and pass the women through, and apparently it got pretty violent. The officers had to fire their guns and so on. But the crew did the worst of all. I think, Don, do you remember how many crew members there were on board and how many died?
Well, I think there were 700 crew members, and off the top of my head, I think about 560 of them passed away.
Yeah, I know, it's just huge, and they stayed their post, they did their duty, they got the people off the ship, and they worked till the end, till the water washed over their heads.
Towards me. Thank you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to begin boarding the lifeboats. For the time being, QM, I require only women and children. This way, madam, please.
Really, I'd rather not.
And as the passengers came out, they were mustered on deck by the officers, and they were told to get into the lifeboats. Ladies first, women and children first, and they didn't want to go. And I'll show you why. This is right adjacent to boat 6. So if I was a passenger on Titanic on that night, I would look over here, and I'd be looking out into a big black night, a big black unlit sea. And right over that edge would be a sheer drop to the water, 60 feet, right? So I'd be looking down, just like this, into nothingness. I would see nothing down there. And I'd think, man, I'm just a whole lot safer on this ship. And the officer's trying to get me to get into boat 6 right here, which was the first one launched from the port side here. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't think so. It looks a whole lot safer back here in this nice warm ship with all the lights on, right? So people didn't get in the lifeboats.
Yeah.
It took them forever to get the first couple boats launched.
Go ahead, sir. Pause! Do you see any moving? Check the main shore. These are dead, sir.
The temperature of the water down here is right about the same as the temperature of the water would have been when people jumped in off Titanic, or when it sank out from beneath them. And that's about 0 centigrade. I mean, it's freezing. It's literally freezing. And you got to remember, the Titanic was going into an ice field of icebergs that were washed down by the Labrador Current. So, people jumped into that water. It was like knives. It was just incredibly painful, like fire almost. I imagine many of them died within a few of them within seconds, many within minutes, and only the hardiest, maybe 2%, lasted more than an hour.
Shortly after the Titanic disaster, there were sweeping changes to the safety procedures and regulations on board passenger ships.
It changed immediately to where you had to have lifeboats for everybody, lifeboat drills, 24-hour radio watch. They created the International Ice Patrol soon after that. The whole reformation of safety at sea laws was because of the Titanic disaster.
It's very strange to be, on the boat deck of Titanic. The other sub hadn't joined us yet, and looking back and seeing all those windows lit up, It's like there was somebody in there.
The remains of those who sank with the ship are long gone. But next, we uncover new evidence of daily life on board and a locked safe.
This is a lavatory.
A high-tech investigation of the wreck of Titanic has produced stunning results.
Pantry. Oh, well, that might be interesting. Let's take a look at the pantry.
Remote camera vehicles have penetrated further into the remains of the ship than ever before.
Good little bot trap that is.
Man, look at this, the wood there on the side of the table is rather intact. This room looks
This whole room looks
well preserved.
ridiculous.
Look, there's things on the wall that...
Oh, we're going in. We are going in.
Even the most mundane parts of Titanic yield archaeological treasure.
Oh my God, look, there are dishes in the cabinets. You know how that happens? The cabinets are closed, and then the doors, you know, dissolve away. Here, I gotta get this. This is too good. This is too cool for school. Gee, look at this.
These are stacked plates. That's a
Yeah,
stack.
that's what I'm saying. It's a bunch of stacked china.
Wow.
That was left in a cupboard, and that now the doors have disintegrated. There's something about seeing it in situ like this that's just amazing, isn't it? I wonder if we can make out the White Star Line.
The chances are this specially designed crockery was never even used.
They're frozen in time.
First-class White Star Line plates. You can see the scalloped edges on these down here. These were provided by Stoniers. These up here are saucers, and they're circular. They don't have scalloped edges. That's a different type of plate.
Like all ceramics, the crockery has survived better than the wood.
Yes, they must have been just pine doors, and that's eaten very quickly by the organisms down there. In fact, this purplish thing right in the middle here appears to be some kind of interesting and strange organism. Look at the little dots along the side, little white dots. Some kind of a deep sea slug or worm or something. I have no idea.
Even when all organic materials have been consumed, these will still be here.
They will last for an awfully long time. They're fired, you know, china, bone china plates. You can see the scalloped edges there.
This life form is bizarre, isn't it?
Yes. Interesting. Different color. Stands right out.
Plates that never got used.
These used to have turquoise, sometimes referred to as the wisteria pattern. They used to have turquoise design.
This apparently mundane find is one of the reasons for James Cameron inviting archaeologist Emily Jeddiff on board.
Well, I mean, this is just incredible. And one of the things that I'm trying to do here is add in all artifacts and structural elements that we see inside of the wreck on this expedition into a master database. You might have seen me back there typing away furiously, but it's a little bit too much right now for me to...
Yeah.
The number of discoveries on this expedition has delighted the archaeological team.
We're going to have a comprehensive database of all interior images collected on this expedition. We separate them all out by class, by decoration, by, you know, location, status. Many different factors go into the database so that we can split it up later, and hopefully it will tell us things about differences between historical and archaeological record so we can compare and contrast.
Even the pantry's plumbing is interesting.
Well,
kind of
got me. I don't think it's a water boiler. I think it might be a freshwater cistern, as I hear Jim saying on the sound here.
Pantries are cool. Well, stuff in here survives.
A little further on, Jim has guided the bot into the first-class purser's office. Here, all passenger requests and telegrams were handled.
Look at that desk just sitting there.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Want to write a letter?
I want to open those drawers.
I know.
What's inside. Look at the design of this little handle fixtures.
There's some. Ken knows there's some kind of drawer pull, metal drawer pull. I guess they're brass or bronze, huh?
Those would be brass drawer pulls, nickel plated, no doubt.
Pretty high ceiling here.
Identical desk to the Marconi room desk up on boat deck like that. That's a surprise.
Well, Hugh McElroy was the first-class purser. He was lost that night. But you also he'd shared the purser's office with storekeepers. They would help keep records and things like that on his behalf. And so probably any one of them might have used the desk.
Passengers would fill out telegraph forms, pay for them in the inquiry office, and they would be sent up via the conveyor to the Marconi room, where the operators would send out the message, then write a receipt for it, and send it back down to the inquiry office.
So what I should do...
So passengers sent and received their telegrams down here on C deck, not in the Marconi room on boat deck.
Safe, so I don't silt out by turning.
What do you...
That's where you'd feed the message in. Isn't that wild?
Just continue it on down to whatever.
I don't know if we knew that that's what those looked like. We meaning the collective, brain trust of the expedition. Oh, what's that right in front of us here?
It's the table underneath the window.
It's above the desk. It's some kind of file box or something. Cool though.
The rest of it spilling
Yeah.
over the side.
Yeah, it's like brown candle wax just pouring down.
What we're looking at right now is the porthole, the forward porthole in the inquiry office, looking directly outboard, and underneath it is a desk. And what we were seeing is the furniture to the right-hand side of the place where the guy would sit, where he'd have the leg room. And it was a cabinet, and probably the pulls or the handles were hidden by the rusticles that were falling down.
Brass lights.
Yeah. And these are shelves, and that's
This is great. Looks like fallen shelves. And this looks like a pivoting light, right? A desk light.
Yeah. Now this whole space was filled with cubby holes. There was a large central desk with a clock mounted atop it, and all along that central desk, I guess you would call it, and along the walls were just various shelves and cubby holes.
He's looking forward here now, and he's looking in the purser's office at what
I think that's a safe.
we think is the safe.
And it's a safe. Maybe it's full of jewels.
Yeah, some diamonds.
Some diamond. No diamond?
No diamonds, but yes, diamonds.
Maybe diamonds.
Let's open it now.
We need a manipulator.
You have a key?
There's a key up on just a few feet from where we are now. Some kind. Yeah, there's something.
Yeah, there's some kind of handle maybe.
Yep, sure enough. Look, it's two handles.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if this is just an upright chest.
Well, what they called a safe might not be a safe as we imagine it, like a bank vault. It's a locking cabinet. Big locking cabinet for valuables.
This safe will never give up whatever treasure it contains, but Cameron is getting more and more confident that he can get into the jewel in Titanic's crown, the legendary Turkish baths. And he's still hunting for evidence that a boiler room fire could have weakened the ship before she hit the iceberg.
This is where all the jewels were.
Every dive that director and explorer James Cameron makes to the Titanic fills in missing pieces of the story about how and why it sank. And he continues to find things that shed new light on the massive scale of the catastrophe. In 2001, while approaching the bow of the ship, Cameron came across something very surprising.
Oh, look at this. What is that, Jenya? It's a hatch cover, I think. Hey, that's a hatch cover.
Yes.
I don't think we've ever seen a hatch cover. Can you back up a little bit?
Yes.
This massive metal lid would have been bolted down over a hatch in the Titanic's foredeck. What mystifies Cameron is how the cover comes to be here, far out in front of the ship, so far that he can't even see the bow. Cameron pilots his sub to the actual hatch over which the metal cover, now 90 yards in front of the ship, used to be securely fixed. Even though many of the ship's structures were torn off during the descent to the bottom, the hatch cover would have been bolted down. There is no obvious explanation for its position. Now, 4 years after he first spotted it, Cameron revisits the scene.
Right there, Toya. Right here. This is a piece.
That's the bow. I saw the front of it.
It's not the bow. It's not the bow. Trust me. It might be the hatch. It's the hatch. I told you it wasn't the bow.
He now thinks he has the answer to this mystery, and he wants to explain it to the team on the Keldysh.
There's an interesting forensic note here. The hatch combing on hatch 1 is intact all the way around. The hatch itself has a huge dent inside of it. That hatch was not knocked off by something. It was blown off by hydraulic pressure, snapped all the bolts, and it was flung forward. I still maintain the only thing it could have hit was the anchor crane at the bow.
When the Titanic broke in two, the bow section was full of water and went down like a torpedo. It picked up speed as it speared through 2 miles of ocean, and eventually over 25,000 tons of wreckage plowed into the bottom at 25 miles an hour. Cameron thinks that water inside the hull shot forward on impact and blasted the hatch cover off its moorings. It's a powerful reminder of the astonishing forces that reduced what was once the world's biggest man-made object to this state. All Titanic explorers have looked for the actual damage caused by the iceberg. Everyone wants to know exactly what kind of gash it took to sink a 46,000-ton ship in under 3 hours. But it will most likely never be seen. Titanic's bow is embedded 62 feet deep in the mud, which hides the section damaged by the berg. Cameron has thoroughly searched this area on previous dives, but never found anything that was obviously iceberg damage. There is one huge hole in the side of the ship that many of the explorers who have dived the wreck initially thought might have been caused by the ice. Ice did not do this. In fact, the forces that made this hole make the iceberg scrape look like a fender bender. Just like the exploding hatch cover, this hole was caused by the impact of the ship on the bottom, followed by a massive eruption of water from within. And it may provide the opening for another investigation.
See how the hull is pulled away? And you can see the structure inside. We're looking aft. You can see right down into the boiler room right there. In fact, we may use this as access to the boiler room on a later dive. That's great.
Cameron wants to get into one of the boiler rooms to check out damage caused by a major fire.
I don't know what would rip the front.
Another little-known fact about the Titanic, certainly the passengers didn't know, was that a major fire was burning in the coal bunker between two of the ship's boilers. It probably started before the ship left port. The firemen couldn't put it out, and all the crew could do was shovel the red-hot coal into the furnaces. They finally extinguished the fire the night before the disaster. They then covered up the damage with black oil to make the bunker look normal. But 2 crew members later testified that the bulkhead between boiler rooms 5 and 6 was significantly warped. The fire damage was very close to where the Titanic hit the berg, and some historians believe it could have seriously weakened the hull and contributed to the rapid sinking of the vessel. For now, Cameron can't get his bots deep enough into the hole to investigate this room, but he will keep trying until he runs out of time. And time is slowly running out for the Titanic. Most of the soft materials in the ship are already gone, eaten away by marine creatures and bacteria. Much of the wood has disappeared too. But it's amazing to find out that Titanic's metalwork is also being consumed.
It was interesting the way the rusticles play out across the hull. It looks almost like it's carved stone. For someone like me, an underwater archaeologist, this is just about as good as it can possibly get, frankly.
In the 10 years that he has been diving here, James Cameron has seen noticeable changes to some features.
We're back here at the forward well deck of Titanic, and if you can look at my bot picture here, you can see the mast, and I'll tilt up, and you can see it goes on up to the bridge. And you can see if you look at Mike's shot here, he's got a great shot that shows how it's really crushed down. And it wasn't like that when we were here in 2001. It was straight as a ruler. So you can really see how the Lori and Roy's bugs are eating this ship, and it's collapsing of its own weight very quickly.
The Titanic isn't rusting. It is actually being eaten away by marine organisms. 200 pounds of metal are being consumed each day. It turns into weird formations called rusticles.
Rusticles are rust-colored icicle-looking structures that you see covering Titanic. And these are actually bacteria, or tiny microscopic organisms, taking the iron and the manganese and the sulfur, the elements that actually make up the steel, and they're taking it out, actually eating Titanic.
The Titanic is becoming this huge living organism. And I always feel like it's becoming this kind of almost work of art, this kind of biomechanical Gothic haunted house.
Although we see some really good preservation on Titanic also because of the fact that it's being consumed, it's a very unstable archaeological site, and it's not going to be around for a whole lot longer.
That's a great point. The thing is that the kind of images that we're able to do right now won't be possible in a few years. This steel is being eaten at a prodigious rate. And the type of investigation that we're able to do with these small ROVs is really critical, because there's so much of the inside of the ship. We plowed a lot of ground on this expedition. We saw a lot of the inside of the ship, but there's still a lot to be done. Of course, that's going to have to be done by somebody else, because I'm going to kind of wrap up my 10-year odyssey with Titanic with this expedition. I won't be coming back here, so it's a little. I'm savoring this moment. I have to tell you, I'm savoring this moment. Just sort of, I feel like I'm kind of standing here on the boat deck. There's something about the perspective of the ROV that's very different than what you see from a submersible. The submersible can't come down here and just kind of walk around the deck the ROV is almost like I get to walk the deck of Titanic, and that's a really neat thing.
There is one section of the ship that hopefully is still very much intact: the magnificent Turkish baths. These were beautifully tiled and epitomized Titanic's luxury. No one has seen them since the ship sank, and Cameron is going to get there before anyone else.
We're going for the Turkish baths. Tell them we're going for the Turkish baths.
2 miles below the surface of the Atlantic, explorer and film director James Cameron is poised to crack one of the last mysteries of the Titanic. For the 10 years he's been diving this wreck, he's dreamed of sending cameras inside the famed Turkish baths. Based on the original plans, we can reconstruct what they would have looked like. Along with an indoor pool, these steam baths were a symbol of the extraordinary opulence of the ship. They were lavishly decorated with Middle Eastern-style wall tiles. And Jim's team believed they should be very well preserved. No other explorer has yet found a way to get an ROV through the wreckage into the baths. Now, back with one of his ultra-compact camera bots, Cameron thinks he has a chance of getting one in.
In 1912, it was pretty much a spa. A real Turkish bath, you're sort of massaged with a hemp glove that exfoliates a lot of skin. And you could get a massage on the Titanic's Turkish bath, but they also had steam rooms and what they called electric baths, which is what I refer to as an easy bake oven. They thought that electricity was therapeutic, and they would wrap you in towels and put you in a box that had a bank of light bulbs in the lid. And then after that, you had different rooms where you could, a temperate room and a cooling room where you could gradually cool down and even go for a swim at the end if you wanted.
Ken, this is a very important find for you, the Turkish baths.
Oh, absolutely. We believe it's the best preserved of any public space inside Titanic because of the materials that it was made of: teak, ceramic tiles, linoleum floor, and bronze lamps. And these things do not deteriorate in seawater based on our experience. So we're really excited about it. It's really not only an elaborate area of Titanic, but a rather garish one. The colors used in there, from bright blues to greens to rust red ceilings and a bright blue linoleum floor, it's pretty an outrageous space.
And Parks, your thoughts?
Well, the Turkish bath was really a challenge. We only have one known photograph from Titanic that shows one corner of the room, and Ken and I decided a while ago to try and collect everything that we knew about the Turkish bath and put it into a CG recreation of the space. It took months of effort, some educated guesses, but I think we've got a pretty good model here. That
well, let's find out if you do or not. Let's take a look at the Turkish baths.
just proceed forward into the grand staircase. And we're going to go down actually 6 decks, and we're going to try to get into the Turkish baths, which we've never seen. Nobody's ever seen it, not since 1912. We're on the boat deck level right now. It went down A deck, B deck, C deck, D deck, and down to E deck. And then below that is a very small, narrow staircase that went down to F deck. And the Turkish baths are deep down in the ship, down in the bowels of the ship on F deck. A freaky cavern down here.
Are we in uncharted territories at this point?
Oh, yeah. We're definitely in uncharted territories at this point. Door to the Turkish baths is just ahead to the left.
Well, you can see the steel walls here, but...
That should be the door right over there. I think I can just get through here.
This is the door you're saying right here?
This is the door. This is
I
the
wonder
door.
if we can get up on that hole there.
But is it closed or is it just ajar?
Oh, it looks like access into something.
We're in the vestibule. Yeah, baby. Tell them we're in the Turkish baths and we see the tiles.
We are in the Turkish baths and we see wall tiles. Perfect. Look at that. You guys made the call. Look at the quality of preservation.
Yeah, Ken called it totally.
The preservation of this room is unreal.
Unbelievable. Look at this.
Oh, there's one of the beds.
Yeah,
one of the
look, there's
recliners.
one of the lounges. Now, I guess these are more of the chaise. Look at that one, it's intact. You talk about deck chairs on the Titanic. There's one right there. Unbelievable. Oh, man. Yeah. So this is all teak. And the teak is in, almost perfect condition. Look at these are little changing stalls. Look at these stools, they're just flipped upside down. They all just got thrown out there.
What happened? Oh, look at that.
So obviously as the ship sank, the wood took in water because of the pressure. They went negative, and then when it hit the bottom, they flipped forward, upside down, out of their respective stalls.
That's exactly what happened.
This is stunning. This is absolutely stunning.
Look at the decorations. That is like perfectly intact.
Let's get a vertical scan of that. Oh, man. Oh, baby. Unbelievable. Ken called it. Ken called it. He said it would be here. Now this is a... Oh, there's look at the preservation of the woodwork.
Is that a dome?
It's a little
feature?
arched. I think it's an arched. Yes, it's a styling flourish that they had to give it that kind of, Middle Eastern flavor.
Yeah, the Moorish revival or something.
Mm-hmm.
What? And is it one of the cooling rooms? I gotta take a look at them.
Well, actually, I think it's a door to a. I know it's like a little storage room of some kind, but they just made it look really cool.
Okay,
yeah, see, look, the door's still in place. Oh, look at that! It's an interlocked Stars of David pattern.
I think just delicate wood patterning, and and then we've got this sort of leaf motif coming across like a palm, almost a palm motif up on top there, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Look at the, that is just stunning. The state of preservation is uncanny. It really is. I mean, you just think this metal room deep down in the ship. Now I feel like, the archaeologists that found, the Palace of Knossos or King Tut's tomb, what it must have felt like to them. This is so beyond what I had hoped for.
It's a tremendous climax to the Cameron Discovery Channel expedition. The Turkish baths rediscovered and thoroughly recorded for the archaeological database. The new bots have gone deeper into the wreck than ever before. They've shown us the once fabulous interiors of the Strauss suite, finding the clock still intact on the mantelpiece. They've revealed the exquisite details of this extraordinary ship and helped to confirm stories of the heroes of the sinking. Could the bots still prove whether the boiler room fire helped doom the Titanic? The wreck is now fading fast, and there is an urgent need to continue exploring before it collapses. James Cameron says this is his last expedition to the Titanic. But with new technology available to him, can he resist the chance to reveal even more mysteries of the ship that has beguiled him?